Thank you for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ijun in Seoul. Countries from around the world will meet in Canada on Tuesday to show solidarity against North Korea's nuclear program. Now, the meeting aims to up the pressure on North Korea and to send a unified message that the international community won't accept Pyongyang becoming a nuclear state. And the Vancouver meeting comes as the two Koreas are holding working-level talks today regarding the North's plan to send its art performers to the Olympics. But before we get to all this, let's first connect to Devin Whiting at the News Center for a quick look at what's making the news at this hour. Devin, take us away.
Thanks, Gia. As you said, South and North Korea are meeting again at the truce village of Panmunjom. North Korea wants to send musicians and art performers to next month's PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games in the South. For more details, let's connect to our Ji Myung-gil at Seoul's Unification Ministry. Myung-gil, what's the latest?
Hello, Devin. The two sides are holding their working-level talks at Tongilgak, a building on the northern side of Panmunjom. The focus of the talks will be sending a North Korean art troupe to the PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games, including the number of artists to perform, the venue, and the schedule. Now, the North four-member delegation is led by the director of North Korea's Performing Arts Bureau at their Culture Ministry, along with two orchestra conductors and the leader of an all-female band called Moranbong. It's likely that North Korea wants to send the Moranbong band to perform during the Games. The band was established in 2012 by the North leader Kim Jong-un, featuring Western-style music and outfits. On the sidelines, there could also be talks about doing joint performances during the opening and closing ceremony of the Winter Games.
Right, well now apart from North Korea sending performers, there's also the urgent matter of sending athletes. When will they get around to talking about that?
You're right, Devin. Actually, North Korea made a counter-proposal about 2 hours ago, suggesting the two sides meet this Wednesday for talks at the vice ministerial level. Now, South Korea had proposed such a meeting last week to send the North Korean delegation athletes to PyeongChang. Now, the North has to finalize on how many athletes they will be discussing and sending and what route they'll take to get to PyeongChang. The North will also be sending a cheering squad, observers, supporters, journalists, and a taekwondo demonstration team. So there are still a lot of practical issues that need to be discussed. The International Olympic Committee will hold a meeting this Saturday, January 20th, with delegations from North and South Korea to finalize the participation of North Korean athletes. So we presume more working-level talks will be scheduled before the big IOC meeting. Back to you, Devin.
All right, thanks, Myung-gil. We'll catch up with you in a bit for the latest updates. Now, so far, it would seem talks between the two Koreas are limited to the Olympics, but a U.S. senator visiting South Korea says dialogue between Seoul and Pyongyang should be backed by a strong South Korea-U.S. alliance, and the ultimate objective has to be denuclearization. Senator Tammy Duckworth, a Democrat, met with the chairman of South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, Chung Kyung-do, this morning. Here she is speaking to reporters.
I think it is important to allow diplomatic talks to continue, but those talks cannot be successful if there is not a strong, ironclad alliance between our two militaries, one that has been there for decades. I think that whatever we can do to continue talks, as long as it is clear that those talks must involve a denuclearized peninsula, is important.
She added that it's a positive sign that North Korean athletes are participating in the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics. In the meeting this morning, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs told her and a congressman traveling with her, Democrat Ruben Gallego, that the peaceful hosting of the Olympics and a lowering of regional tensions will contribute to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula and help bring peace and stability to the region. Both sides reaffirmed the two countries' ironclad alliance and their firm military posture. New data suggests big cuts to tariffs on trade between South Korea and the United States would mean billions of dollars in savings for consumers in both countries. According to a report released Monday by the Korea Economic Research Institute, consumers in South Korea over the next 10 years could save up to $3 billion, and in the U.S., $5.3 billion. if the two countries agreed to completely abolish tariffs on goods in the primary and manufacturing industries. A researcher from the institute said the study shows that without those tariffs, consumers would benefit from a rise in productivity. The data also show that average real wage rates in the two countries would rise. The U.S. workers would see a gain of almost 0.04%, while Korean workers would see a rise of almost 0.4%. Korea is seeing high levels of fine dust pollution for a second day in a row. But commuters in Seoul this morning were in for a pleasant surprise: free public transport. This is part of the government's efforts to bring down fine dust levels by encouraging people to leave their cars at home for a day. Lee Jung-hyun has more.
For the first time ever, commuters in Seoul were exempt from paying public transportation fees on Monday morning. This is a part of the Seoul government's emergency measures to deal with fine dust levels that are expected to be significantly high on Monday and Tuesday. The emergency measures are implemented when fine dust levels go above 50 micrograms per cubic meter, and Seoul saw levels of 57 as of 4 p.m. Sunday.
The fee waiver provides an incentive for people to take public transport, and it also raises awareness of the severity of the air pollution. The emergency measures may be a foreign concept to the public now, but we're hoping they'll catch on over time.
The alternating driving system, which asks drivers to take turns using their vehicles based on whether they have an odd and even-numbered license plate, was also adopted, and more than 300 public parking lots were closed.
The financial aspect will definitely motivate more people to take public transport, and I believe these small efforts will take us in the right direction.
I'm not sure how much it will change, but I guess even one less car on the road would help. My daughter has asthma and I'm a cancer patient myself, so fine dust is a worry for me personally.
Medical experts say fine dust can affect anyone, regardless of health or age.
Those with weak immune systems, such as children or seniors, would be affected the most. But even those who are healthy would feel lethargic when exposed to high levels of fine dust.
The expert adds that many studies now show that those living in areas with high levels of fine dust have shorter lifespans, and that fine dust is linked to all types of health problems, not just limited to the lungs. This current rise in fine dust levels is mainly attributed to the wind coming from the northwest and the increased pollution from heating systems in China, where people are trying to cope with plummeting temperatures. With high levels of fine dust projected until Wednesday, commuters are advised to wear masks when outdoors and to keep to the alternate days driving recommendations to reduce pollution on the road. Lee Jung-hyun, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are our news headlines for this hour.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa will set off to Canada later today to attend a high-level international meeting on the situation with North Korea. But there are questions over the meeting's credibility, as China and Russia, countries considered key players in any long-term solution regarding North Korea, will be absent. And before we sit down with an expert to talk more about this, here's our Kwon Jung-ho with a brief look at what we can expect from the Vancouver meeting.
The inaugural Vancouver Foreign Ministers meeting on security and stability on the Korean Peninsula will open on Tuesday. Co-hosted by the US and Canada, it looks to extend the international effort to find a peaceful resolution to the North Korea nuclear situation. Those invited are being called the Vancouver Group and will include most nations that fought in the Korean War under the UN flag, such as the UK, France and Turkey, as well as South Korea, and other interested parties like India, Japan and Sweden. However, notable absentees from the list include China, Russia and North Korea. It's unclear whether they were formally invited or not, but their absence has caused some to question the effectiveness and purpose of the meeting. Beijing has criticized the gathering, saying that without all the major relevant parties involved, the meeting would not help the situation on the Korean Peninsula and only create further divisions in the international community on the issue. The main outcome of the summit could be an agreement to push for further pressure on the regime, especially to try and disrupt ships transporting illicit oil supplies to the regime at sea. However, the mood of the meeting has changed since it was first announced in December. Tensions in the Korean Peninsula have dropped after North Korea reopened dialogue with the South for the first time in 2 years to try and take part in the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics next month. And the calls for an immediate hardline stance on the regime have also softened with it. Aside from the main gathering, like other international events of this kind, the summit also offers the opportunity for sideline meetings to take part between individual countries. A trilateral South Korea-US-Japan meeting has been touted, as well as a separate South Korea-US meeting. But perhaps the most highly anticipated will be the potential Seoul Foreign Ministers meeting with their Tokyo counterpart. South Korea-Japan relations have soured again in recent weeks after the Moon administration condemned the controversial 2015 Seoul-Tokyo agreement on the issue of Japanese wartime sex slavery. While Seoul did not ask for a renegotiation, it has called on Tokyo to offer a sincere apology to the victims. Tokyo has argued that the agreement was an apology and that Seoul simply cannot ignore it. It's not clear what could come from the meeting, but it promises to be a highly charged affair. 권장호, Arirang News.
And to tell us more about the meeting and how it will affect inter-Korea relations, Dr. Bong Young-sik, a researcher at the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies, joins us in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Pleased to be here.
All right, so now this meeting was scheduled way before North Korea played this dialogue card. So tell us more about this meeting and also which countries are participating in, and as well as why it's being held.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. This meeting was scheduled prior to the beginning of the inter-Korean dialogue, which resulted from the initiative taken by the Moon Jae-in government by proposing to Pyongyang that Pyongyang will restrain herself from the PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games. Then South Korea and the United States would consider postponing the joint military exercise, which came to fruition with the New Year's message delivered by Chairman Kim Jong-un. So this Vancouver meeting is going to be held as scheduled, and the core members are the countries who sent troops during the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. The 16 member countries of the United Nations, plus countries invited to join this meeting. And it is jointly hosted by the United States and Canada.
And now, how effective then do you think this meeting will be, considering that the two Koreas have already met and they're talking about various inter-Korean issues, including the North's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Games?
Well, I would say that the more the better, given the complexity of North Korea's threat. Now the North Korea's missile and nuclear threats is not really limited to just a threat in a regional context or inter-Korean relations, but it's a global threat and a direct threat to the national security of the United States, since North Korea has declared that it has acquired the capacity to attack with its nuclear weapons, topped with ICBMs, any part of the United States, including Guam. This multi-layered nature of North Korea's threats would demand multilateral approaches to settle the problem. And this is a positive first step, because at the heart of the North Korean nuclear crisis, even North Koreans themselves admit, is the continued hostility on the Korean Peninsula since the armistice agreement was signed in 1953 that suspended the Korean War. But we are officially and legally speaking still in the state of war.
Right. Now, China and Russia, like we heard in the report, are not expected to take part in this meeting. Why so?
Because China and Russia would be cornered, because it'll be China or Russia on one hand and the rest of the participants on the other.
Right.
So China and Russia would prefer to exercise their influence in other venues, such as the United Nations Security Council or the BI. Sending the message that it is time to resume the six-party talks with North Korea.
Now, some critics are saying that, they're questioning the credibility of this meeting with the absence of China and Russia, which are two of most important and influential neighbors of North Korea.
You can say that, but it is your decision what kind of priority you are going to highlight. As you pointed out at the initial remark, that the key theme in this Vancouver meeting is solidarity of like-minded countries. The main point of this Vancouver meeting is to confirm the solidarity among these countries that the maximum pressure on North Korea in the form of the unilateral and the multilateral economic sanction must remain as a top priority, most efficient and needed method to lead meaningful change of North Korea's behavior. In the China and Russia may jump on the ship if they find that international solidarity is the inevitable trend, and it serves as strategic interest to be on board. And I remind you that it is first time that China has been on board by agreeing on the most recent series of United Nations Security Councils led by the United States in putting additional pressure on North Korea.
And agreeing on the sanctions, right?
Right.
Right. Well, what kind of responses then can we expect from other countries participating in this event?
Well, the result of this event is interlocked with the development of other initiatives, potentially led by other countries, including China and Russia, because if these countries would succeed in confirming their ironclad solidarity in putting maximum pressure on North Korea until North Korea would smoke out to agree on the diplomatic solution to the nuclear crisis, then by considering and observing the very strong solidarity among these countries, then China and Russia would take the next step, which will lead to another progress in terms of persuading North Korean regime to abandon provocative actions, but to choose a more diplomatic path.
Now, South and North Korea are holding working-level talks at Tongilgak today on the prospects of Pyongyang sending its arts performance group to PyeongChang Winter Games. So what impact will this meeting have on Tuesday's Vancouver meeting?
I don't think these are two separate items because by insistence upon North Korean authority, the talks between the two governments of Korea have been focused on delegation of North Korea, the athletes, and performers of the art. We are talking about the potential participation of Morambong art performing groups, but there is a lot of political and legal issues to accommodate the demand by North Korea. So we are still miles away to see whether such inter-Korean talks would eventually lead to meaningful dialogue between Washington and Pyongyang on different issue, which is denuclearization.
Right.
So these are rather separate issues. The Vancouver meeting is focused on one thing, which is to confirm solidarity on maximum pressure on North Korea until North Korea will take a very fundamentally different posture on its missile and nuclear programs.
Now, going into the specifics of the meeting, the U.S. and Canada are expected to ask for the authority to interdict vessels suspected of violating various sanctions on North Korea. So tell us more about this maritime interdiction and how it differs from maritime blockade or naval blockade, which the U.S. has been trying to enforce on North Korea.
Yeah, the key issue or key concept to make distinction between MIO, maritime interdiction operation, and quarantine or naval blockade is whether the use of force, if the ship will resisting the attempt for inspection is available or not. The United States has been really forthcoming and pressuring other member countries in the United Nations to include the right to use of force in the UN Security Council resolution against North Korea. But because of oppositions by China and Russia, the use of force clause is still not in place for the UN Security Council resolutions. If the use of force clause is accepted, then we are talking about the naval blockade you mentioned.
Okay.
Imagine the situation in 1960, so JFK, the Kennedy administration, putting the entire Cuba under so-called quarantine.
All right. Well, now I'm wondering, though, how has Seoul responded to the plans of maritime interdiction then?
So far, South Korea has been really loyal and faithful in observing all the resolutions, domestic and international, in terms of preventing North Korea from smuggling the banned items and technology that could be used to weapon purchase and manufacturing. There are several measures that South Korea signed on, including the May 24 measures, which prevents the North Korean vessels from coming into South Korean national territorial waters. And there's a proliferation security initiative, which is designed to inspect and prevent the smuggling of the sensitive and weapon materials to North Korea. And we have two United Nations Security Council resolutions. The UN Security Council Resolution 2375, which stipulates that all countries to inspect ships going in and out of North Korea, North Korea's ports, to authorize the inspection. And if the flag nation would refuse this demand for inspection, then the ship will be subject to the penalty or the forced to be moved to a different port. And there's another one, most recent UN Security Council Resolution 2397, which stipulates that the UN member states were authorized to, quote, seize, inspect, freeze, and impound any vessel in their territorial waters found to illicitly supply petroleum to North Korea. And of course, South Korea is one of the United Nations members.
All right. Well, now going back to what we heard in the report, there's also the possibility that the South Korean foreign minister could meet with her Japanese and American counterparts on the sidelines of the Vancouver meeting.
I wouldn't see it be a very pleasant meeting.
Yeah. Between the two. But what's your outlook on those meetings if they do take place?
Well, they will take some photos together with a very stern face.
Obviously.
Conscious of the domestic viewers and audiences. I think it'll be a very business-like meeting between two foreign ministers to exchange their own, views or how they would proceed from this point on. When the bilateral relationship is at the bottom, but at the same time, Moon Jae-in government pledged that it will relentlessly pursue so-called two-track policy toward Japan. That South Korea will separate its position on historical and territorial issues on one hand, and it will be very positive and aggressive in cultivating and upgrading its partnership with Japan in other areas such as security, politics, human exchange, and economic cooperation. So we'll see.
All right. Well, then what's your take on any potential dialogue between the United States and North Korea? I mean, President Donald Trump has said earlier this month that he is open to talks with North Korea under the right circumstances.
Well, the devil lies in the detail, the right circumstances. The concept of the right circumstances may miles apart between North Korean leadership and Trump administration.
Right.
The right circumstances for Washington is very clear, that North Korean leadership should commit to the premise that any diplomatic dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington is about denuclearization of North Korea in, irreversible and verifiable way. But North Korea's concept of the right circumstances is that the United States will have acknowledged North Korea as nuclear power state. So unless the two sides narrow the gap, then the right circumstances may not be made at all.
Do you think there will be any response coming from North Korea in response to the Vancouver meeting or whatever comes out of that meeting?
Surely, as you said, that the Korean Central News Agency changes the attitude and criticized the Moon Jae-in government in the very short segment for 3 minutes, at least 25 times.
Oh, wow.
That is a totally different attitude illustrated by the previous statements or remarks by the Mr. Lee Seung-kwon or even Chairman Kim Jong-un. I mean, Mr. Lee Seung-kwon even used the official title for when he referred to President Moon Jae-in of South Korea. Right? So North Korea is kind of testing the water, whether you could drive the wedge between Washington and Seoul, but at the same time try to leave enough leverage upon Washington and Seoul that by reiterating its position that we are not going to discuss in any ways about denuclearization.
All right. Well, for now, I guess we'll definitely keep our eyes on what comes out of the Vancouver meeting on Tuesday, as well as the talks that are ongoing between the two Koreas. Thank you so much for coming in today.
You're welcome.
And that brings us to the end of our show. But stay tuned to Arirang for more on the Vancouver meeting, as well as up-to-date news on inter-Korea talks over the North's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye for now.